Michael Chen wasn't supposed to find it. He was 3 miles into his morning run. Same beach, same route, same 6 a.m. silence he'd kept for 2 years. The kind of man who liked predictable things, who ironed his shirts on Sunday nights and always knew where his keys were. But on March 14, 2023, on a remote stretch of California coastline, predictability died. Because half buried in the sand, stretching from a dune all the way into the Pacific Ocean, was something that had absolutely no business being there. A steel tube, the size of a school bus, still dripping. And that's when everything changed. If you've never seen one of our stories before, hit subscribe. We find the real ones. Michael almost missed it. He'd been running with his head down, earbuds in, replaying a work meeting in his mind the way we all do at 6 a.m. when the brain refuses to be quiet. It was the shadow that stopped him, a dark shape against the pale sand that didn't match anything he knew. He pulled out his earbuds. The object stretched nearly 40 feet across the beach. Partially buried at one end, and at the other, it disappeared beneath the waterline like a giant finger pointing into the sea. The metal surface was a patchwork of rust and something else entirely. Sections that looked factory fresh, untouched, gleaming in the early morning fog. Michael is a structural engineer by trade. A man who has spent 15 years looking at materials and knowing exactly what they are and what they're for. He walked a slow circle around the object, crouching, studying. He did not know what this was. That scared him more than anything. He reached out and touched it. Cold, yes, but not hard. The outer layer had the density of industrial rubber, the kind used in deep-sea applications to insulate against extreme pressure. There were faint markings on it, worn down by salt water. Symbols he couldn't immediately place. And there was something else, a low, barely perceptible vibration, like something inside was still running. Michael stepped back, took a breath, and did what any rational person with 15 years of engineering experience would do in that moment. He took out his phone and called 911. The operator's name was Sandra. She'd been working dispatch for 11 years. She'd heard everything. She almost dismissed him. "A pipe on the beach, sir?" Michael, breathing hard, still shaking, said, "Sandra, I'm a structural engineer. I've worked on offshore platforms. I've never seen anything like this in my life, and it's vibrating." That word vibrating changed her tone completely. Within 20 minutes, 2 patrol units arrived. Within 40, there were 6. A helicopter appeared over the ridgeline. Not news, not civilian. Military markings. The officers who arrived first did something unusual. They didn't photograph the object. They photographed the area around it. Footprints, tide marks, the exact position of the dune. They worked with the focused calm of people following a protocol they already knew. They weren't confused, he later told reporters. They were precise, like they'd done a drill for this. The beach was cordoned off within the hour. Crime scene tape in both directions. The few early joggers who'd shown up were turned away with polite firmness and no explanation. Michael was walked through a full debrief. What time he arrived, which direction he approached from, whether he'd touched it. Yes, once rubber section. No cuts or abrasions. And critically, had he posted anything online, he had. 23 minutes after his original post, it had been shared 14,000 times. The internet had already generated 37 competing theories before the police had finished their first perimeter sweep. Theories ranged from a lost section of the Nord Stream pipeline, actually physically impossible given the Atlantic to Pacific geography, to a Chinese surveillance buoy, to a prop from a Netflix production that had supposedly been filming 80 miles north. One Reddit thread had assembled what looked like genuine satellite imagery showing an anomalous object in the water at that location appearing 3 days prior. Michael, still at the scene, was watching his phone erupt in real time. And then it rang, blocked number. A voice he didn't recognize, measured, knowledgeable, and precise in a way that made his stomach drop. The caller spoke for less than 90 seconds. They knew what the object was. They knew its origin. They gave Michael a project name, 3 words, and told him to give the phone to the senior officer on scene immediately. Michael handed it over without a word. He watched the officer listen, watched his face change, watched him turn and make a direct call on a separate radio. 2 minutes later, full evacuation order. Here's what it actually was, and it's stranger than the theories. The object was a segment of a subsea power cable, specifically a high-voltage direct current transmission line manufactured by a European energy infrastructure company for a cross-Pacific grid interconnection project. These cables are built in segments up to 50 meters long, then joined at sea. They're wrapped in multiple layers including polyethylene insulation and HDPE sheathing, which is exactly why it felt like rubber to Michael's hand. The vibration, residual electromagnetic charge. These cables carry up to 50-25 kilovolts. Even severed, even adrift, the section retains charge that can discharge unpredictably, which is why the evacuation was immediate and why the response team that arrived wore insulation-rated gear. The cable had broken free during a severe Pacific storm system 6 weeks earlier, roughly 200 nautical miles offshore. The company, aware it was missing, had been conducting a quiet search, coordinating with the U.S. Coast Guard under a maritime salvage protocol that kept the search out of public channels. The blocked caller, a field coordinator from the cable company who had been monitoring social media for exactly this kind of report, under instruction to escalate directly to emergency services the moment it appeared, he saw Michael's post within 8 minutes of it going up. The military helicopter was Coast Guard's standard protocol for any unidentified large maritime object within the U.S. exclusive economic zone. The tugboat that arrived that afternoon was pre-authorized. The recovery took 6 hours. No injuries. Michael still runs that beach. He says it looks exactly the same as it always did. Quiet, remote, the kind of place where the only thing you expect to find is your own thoughts. But he checks the waterline now, every time, because that morning taught him something that no amount of routine can undo. The ocean keeps its own schedule. And sometimes if you happen to be the right person in the right place at the right time, it returns them directly to you. Before the world woke up, he printed it out. It's on the wall in his office, between his engineering certifications and a framed note from his daughter. The caption reads, "Pay attention." That's the story of Michael Chen and the morning the Pacific gave something back. If this one got you, subscribe. We find these stories every week, real ones. The kind that make you think twice about what's buried just below the surface of ordinary days.